The great chamber of Ethon Prime had stood for 3,000 cycles, and in all that time, it had never known silence quite like this moment would bring. The moment was still to come for now. The Council of the Stars gathered in their ancient seats. 12 species who had ruled the galaxy since before humanity had learned to make fire. And they spoke of War High Arbiter Thyssen floated at the center of the chamber, his body made of living light that shifted between gold and white. And his voice carried the weight of 800 cycles of absolute authority. "We are here to discuss the human problem," he announced. And the words echoed off walls made of crystal that had been grown over 10,000 years. Ambassador Kethvorn of the Silvery Dominion rose from his seat, his forearms spreading wide in a gesture of righteous anger, his scales shimmering with barely contained fury. "Problem is too gentle a word," Kethvorn declared. "These creatures are a plague, a disease, a cancer that spreads through our sectors without permission or shame." The other counselors murmured their agreement. Sounds that ranged from the clicking of mandibles to the deep rumbling of beings made from living stone. "Let us review their crimes," Kethvorn continued, activating a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber with glowing text and images. "In the past 50 cycles alone, humanity has violated 17 of our most sacred treaties. They have colonized 43 worlds beyond their allotted borders. They have refused to submit their military vessels for inspection as required by law. And most insulting of all, they have ignored 3 formal summons to appear before this very council." Fleet Commander Zeraxis of the Hegemony stood next, his massive form casting a shadow across half the chamber, his gray skin marked with the scars of 100 battles. "I have studied these humans," Zeraxis said, his voice like grinding metal. "They are young, barely 2 centuries into spaceflight, yet they act as if they own the stars. This arrogance cannot be tolerated." High Arbiter Thyssen's light pulsed brighter for a moment, a sign of his agreement. "The question before us is simple," Thyssen said. "Do we teach humanity their place through force, or do we remove them from existence entirely?" Councillor Yenth of the Mime Collective spoke then, her voice seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. For her species had evolved beyond physical form long ago. "We must consider the possibility that they have weapons we do not know about," Yenth cautioned. "Their refusal to allow inspection suggests they are hiding something." Laughter rippled through the chamber, a sound of pure contempt from a dozen different species. "What could primitives possibly hide that would threaten us?" asked Admiral Korath of the Stellar Empire, his feathered crest rising with amusement. "We have conquered 1,000 species. We have technology that these humans cannot even dream of. They are nothing but clever animals with delusions of importance." The laughter grew louder, and even the cautious Yenth seemed to accept the logic of her fellow counselors. High Arbiter Thyssen raised one hand of light, and the chamber fell silent. "It is decided then," he announced. "Fleet Commander Zeraxis, you will take a combined armada to the human home system. You will escort their delegation to this chamber by whatever means necessary. If they resist, you will demonstrate the consequences of defying the council." Zeraxis bowed his massive head, a smile spreading across his scarred face. "How many ships shall I take?" he asked. 4,000, Thyssen replied. "Enough to crack moons, enough to boil oceans, enough to remind the galaxy why the council rules supreme." The fleet commander's smile grew wider. "It will be my pleasure," he said within 3 rotations. The Armada was assembled, 4,000 warships from 12 different species, each one a masterpiece of destruction that had been refined over millennia of war. For Azarasis stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crushing Tide, a vessel so large that it had its own weather systems inside its cavernous hangars. "Set course for Sol," he commanded. "Maximum speed." The Armada jumped into hyperspace, reality bending around them as they crossed the vast distances between stars in mere moments. When they emerged at the edge of the human home system, Xyraxis expected to find panic and fear, fleets scrambling to defend against the overwhelming force he had brought instead. He found a single ship. It was small, barely larger than a diplomatic courier, and it was painted entirely in black, a black so deep that it seemed to drink in the light of the distant sun. "Scan that vessel," Xyraxis ordered. Confusion creeping into his voice, his sensor officer worked frantically at his console, then looked up with uncertainty in his eyes. "Commander, our sensors cannot penetrate its hull. It is as if the ship does not fully exist in our reality." Before Xyraxis could respond, a transmission came through. Audio only. A human voice, speaking in calm and measured tones. "Fleet Commander Xyraxis, welcome to our home. We have been expecting you." The fleet commander leaned forward in his command chair, his scarred face twisted with contempt. "You have been expecting 4,000 warships?" He growled. "Then you know why we are here. You will surrender immediately and accompany us to face the judgment of the Council." There was a pause, and then the human voice responded with words that would haunt Xyraxis for whatever remained of his life. "We accept your invitation. Follow us." The small black ship turned and began to move deeper into the system, not fleeing, not fighting, simply leading the way as if the greatest armada ever assembled was nothing more than an escort party. Xyraxis felt something cold settle in his stomach, something he had not felt in over a century of warfare, something that might have been fear, but he pushed it aside and ordered his fleet to follow after all. What could one small ship possibly mean against the might of the Council? He would learn the answer soon enough, and when he did, the Council of the Stars would finally know what silence truly meant. The doors of the Council chamber were 30 meters tall and made from a metal that had been forged in the heart of a dying star. And they had opened for emperors and warlords and beings of godlike power for 3,000 cycles. Today, they opened for 3 humans in simple black uniforms. Admiral Alara Vance walked at the front, her gray hair cut short and her blue eyes steady and calm. And she moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. Behind her walked Commander James Chun and Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, equally calm, equally unafraid, as if they were walking into a routine meeting rather than facing the judgment of the galaxy's most powerful beings. The Mai counselors watched them approach with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. These small, soft creatures who had dared to defy the natural order of things. Hi. Arbiter Thassan's light blazed brighter as he looked down upon them from his elevated position. "You stand before the Council of the Stars," he declared, his voice filling every corner of the vast chamber. "You will kneel." Admiral Vance stopped in the center of the chamber and looked up at the being of living light without a trace of fear on her weathered face. "No," she said simply. The word hung in the air like a physical thing. And for a moment, the entire chamber seemed frozen in disbelief. Ambassador Kethvorn shot to his feet, his scales flushing dark red with rage. "You dare refuse?" he screamed. "You primitive, insignificant creature. You dare refuse the command of the High Arbiter?" "I dare," Vance replied, her voice as calm as still water. "And I am neither primitive nor insignificant. I am Admiral Alara Vance of the United Human Federation, and I bow to no one who has not earned my respect." The chamber erupted in angry shouts and threats, a dozen species all screaming their outrage at once. But Vance stood unmoved in the center of the storm. High Arbiter Thassan raised his hands, and slowly the noise subsided. "You are bold," he said, and there was something almost like amusement in his ancient voice. "But boldness without power is merely foolishness. Let me tell you what will happen now." He gestured, and holographic images appeared in the air around the humans. showing worlds burning and species being herded into camps and fleets. Being torn apart by overwhelming force, you will surrender unconditionally. Thiessen continued. You will dissolve your fleet. You will cede your colonies to council control. You will submit to genetic modification to make your species more suitable for integration into our civilization. And you will provide 1 million of your people each cycle to serve as labor for the elder races. Vance watched the images of destruction without any change in her expression. And if we refuse? She eschewed. Thiessen's light pulsed with what might have been anger or might have been dark amusement. Then we will do to your species what we have done to so many others. We will burn your worlds and salt the ashes. We will hunt down every human in the galaxy and erase your kind from existence. We will make it so that in 1,000 cycles, no one will even remember that humanity ever existed. The threat hung in the air. And even Fleet Commander Zyraxis shifted uncomfortably, for he had carried out such orders before and knew that the Council did not make empty promises. But Admiral Vance simply smiled. It was a thin smile, a knowing smile, a smile that made several of the counselors suddenly feel very cold despite the perfect temperature control of the chamber. You speak of our fleet, she said, but you have never seen it. Cathvorin laughed. A harsh barking sound. We have seen enough, he sneered. Our scouts have counted your ships, barely 300 vessels. Most of them converted cargo haulers. You are nothing. Your scouts saw what we wanted them to see, Vance replied. For 200 years, we have watched you. We have studied your methods. We have learned how you treat the young races who are foolish enough to reveal themselves to you. She began to pace slowly, her boots clicking against the crystal floor, and every eye in the chamber followed her movement. We saw how you welcomed the Vorthen with open arms, only to enslave them within a generation. We saw how you praised the Keleth for their art and music, then sterilized their homeworld when they asked for equal representation. We saw what you did to the Mindari, to Sethrax, the Yuln, and 100 other species who made the mistake of trusting you. Her voice remained calm, almost conversational, but her words struck like hammers, so we decided not to make that mistake. We decided to stay hidden until we were ready. We decided to become something that you could not ignore, could not threaten, could not destroy. High Arbiter Thiessen leaned forward, his light flickering in ways that suggested unease. What are you saying, human? Vance stopped pacing and faced the ancient being directly. I am saying that you do not know us. You think you do? You think we are like all the others, young and foolish and easily crushed. But we are not. She reached down to her wrist and touched a small device that had gone unnoticed until this moment. I am saying that while you sat in this chamber, congratulating yourselves on your power and your wisdom, we were building something that will change everything you think you know about this galaxy. Counselor Yenth of the Mind Collective suddenly straightened in her seat, her formless presence rippling with alarm. There is something here, she whispered. Something vast, something I cannot see, something impossible. Admiral Vance's smile grew slightly wider. Would you like to see what humanity has been doing for the past 200 years? She asked. Would you like to understand why we ignored your summons and your threats and your demands? She pressed the device on her wrist. Perhaps a demonstration is in order. The lights in the chamber flickered once, and outside the crystal walls, something began to change. Something began to reveal itself. And the Council of the Stars was about to learn that they had made a terrible, terrible mistake. The counselors had returned to their seats, though none of them sat with the same confidence they had shown before, and they listened as Admiral Vance told them the story of humanity's secret journey. 212 years ago, she began. A human exploration vessel discovered the wreckage of an alien ship drifting at the edge of our solar system. The crew was long dead, but the computer core was intact. And when our scientists decoded it, they found something that changed everything. She paused, looking around the chamber at the ancient beings who had ruled the galaxy for so long. The ship belonged to the Keleth, a species that your records say died out naturally from a genetic plague. But the truth was different. The truth was that the Council had engineered that plague because the Keleth were becoming too advanced, too independent, too difficult to control. Ambassador Kethvarn started to protest, but Vance continued without acknowledging him. The Keleth captain had recorded everything before he died. The secret meetings where your scientists designed the plague, the delivery system that spread it through their water supply, the council debates where you discussed whether to save a small population for use as servants before deciding that complete extinction was safer. Those records are lies. Kethvarn shouted. The Keleth were our allies. The Keleth were your victims, Vance replied coldly. Just like the Mindari, who you bombarded from orbit when they developed weapons that could threaten your ships. Just like the Sethrex, whose homeworld you rendered uninhabitable because they refused to share their medicine technology. Just like the Yulin, whose entire species you genetically modified into mindless workers because they were too intelligent to be easily controlled. She activated her wrist device again, and holographic images filled the chamber, documents and recordings and evidence that had been gathered over 2 centuries of patient investigation. We found survivors. Dr. Okonkwo said softly, refugees from species that your records claimed had gone extinct. They came to us in secret, drawn by rumors of a young race that was building something new. They brought their knowledge and their stories and their desperate hope that someone might finally stand against you. Commander Chun stepped forward. The Keleth taught us advanced physics. The Mindari shared their weapons technology. The Sethrax gave us their medical knowledge. And the Yulin, the few who escaped before the genetic modification, they taught us something even more valuable. What? High Arbiter Thyssen asked, his voice hollow. They taught us how to think differently. Chun replied, the Yulin had the most advanced minds in the galaxy before you destroyed them. They saw connections that other species missed. They looked at problems from angles that no one else considered. And they looked at dark matter and saw not an obstacle but an opportunity. Admiral Vance nodded. A Yoan scientist named Kethra spent 40 years working with our researchers. She was old and tired and knew she would not live to see the results of her work. But she refused to give up. She told us that if we could unlock the secrets of dark matter, we would have power that even the Council could not match. She looked up at the images floating above them, images of alien faces from species that the Council had tried to erase from existence. Kethra died 7 years ago, but she lived long enough to see our first dark matter prototype successfully activate. She lived long enough to know that her people's sacrifice would mean something. She lived long enough to know that the Council's crimes would not go unanswered forever. The chamber was silent now. The councillors, staring at the evidence of their own atrocities displayed before them, Councillor Yenth of the Mind Collective spoke, her voice trembling. How many species have you hidden among you? She asked. 23. Vance replied. 23. Species that you tried to exterminate or enslave. They live in our space now, protected by our laws and our fleet. They are citizens of the United Human Federation with the same rights as any human. She turned to face the High Arbiter directly. You asked earlier what we want. The answer is justice. But not revenge, not genocide. Not the kind of justice that you have practiced for 3,000 years. Dr. Okonkwo activated another display, showing worlds across the galaxy, worlds that still suffered under Council rule in the past decade alone. Your Council authorized the sterilization of 3 pre-spaceflight civilizations. She said, the Varn of Kepler 442b, the Methane Singers of Gliese 667c, and the Stone Builders of Trappist 1e. All of them destroyed because they were deemed genetically inconvenient, or potentially disruptive to your order. We have evidence of everything. Commander Chun added. Every secret meeting, every hidden order, every crime committed in the name of stability and control. We have been gathering this evidence for 200 years, waiting for the right moment to use it. High Arbiter Thessens. Light flickered between colors that no one in the chamber had ever seen before. Colors that suggested emotions too complex for words. You could have come to us sooner, he said. You could have negotiated, made deals, found a peaceful solution. Admiral Vance shook her head slowly. We watched and waited because we needed to know if there was any honor left in your council. We gave you chance after chance to prove that you had changed, that you were capable of mercy and justice. She gestured at the evidence floating around them. Instead, you kept killing. You kept enslaving. You kept treating younger species like resources to be exploited rather than lives to be respected. And now here we are. Fleet Commander Xeraxis suddenly stood up. His scarred face twisted with desperate anger. Enough. He roared. I do not care what evidence you have. I do not care how many ships surround us. I am Fleet Commander Xeraxis of the Hegemony, and I will not be lectured by primitives. He raised his communication device to his mouth. All ships. Open fire. Destroy the human fleet. Destroy them all. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Xeraxis looked down at his device with confusion. Pressing buttons that produced no response, Admiral Vance watched him with something that might have been pity. Your communications have been jammed since we revealed ourselves, she said quietly. Your flagship is caught in a gravitational web that would tear it apart if the captain tried to move. And every one of your 4,000 ships has a human vessel positioned to destroy it in less than 1 second if we give the order. She stepped closer to the massive fleet commander, looking up at him without fear. You cannot fight us, Xeraxis. You cannot run from us. You cannot threaten us or intimidate us or bully us into submission. All you can do is listen. Xeraxis sank back into his seat, defeated in a way that no battle had ever defeated him. Admiral Vance turned to address the entire council once more. Now, she said, let us discuss the future. The crystal walls of the council chamber had been designed to inspire awe, to show visiting species the vast power of the council through the view of space beyond, where great fleets could be displayed like trophies for 3,000 cycles. Those walls had shown the might of the Elder, races to all who came seeking favor or fearing judgment, but now they showed something else entirely. High Arbiter Thiessen turned his blazing form toward the viewport, expecting to see Fleet Commander Xeraxis' Armada arranged in perfect formation. 4,000 warships ready to enforce the will of the Council. Instead, he saw darkness, not the familiar darkness of space, dotted with distant stars, but something deeper, something wrong, something that seemed to swallow light itself. The stars were still there, but they looked different now, bent and warped as if seen through water, twisted by forces that should not exist. What is this? Thiessen demanded, his ancient voice cracking for the first time in centuries. Ambassador Kethvorin pressed himself against the crystal wall, his forearms spread wide, his scale shifting through colors that indicated pure terror. The stars, he whispered. The stars are moving. But it was not the stars that moved it. Was the shadows between them. Admiral Vance stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching the counselors with calm satisfaction as their world began to crumble around them. 200 years ago, she said, when humanity first developed faster than light travel, we discovered something interesting. We discovered that the universe contains far more matter than anyone can see. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo stepped forward, her dark eyes reflecting the strange shadows that writhed outside the viewport. Dark matter, she explained in her soft voice. It makes up most of the mass in the universe, but it does not interact with light or normal matter in ways that can be easily detected. Your scientists knew it existed, but they believed it could never be harnessed. Impossible. Fleet Commander Ziraxis growled, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. The equations do not allow for dark matter manipulation. It is a fundamental law of physics. Commander James Chun smiled at this, the first expression he had shown since entering the chamber. Your equations, he said. Not ours. Admiral Vance pressed another control on her wrist device, and outside the chamber, the impossible became real. The darkness peeled away cloaking fields that had hidden the human fleet disengaged one by one. And ships began to appear where nothing had existed moments before. They emerged like nightmares given form. Massive vessels that seemed to be made from shadows and starlight, and something that hurt the eyes to look at. Directly their hulls were angular and predatory, built from alloys that drank in light rather than reflecting it. And they shimmered with gravitational distortions that bent space itself around them. Weapons arrays ran along their spines, glowing with a violet-black energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. And each pulse sent ripples through the fabric of reality. There were hundreds of them, then thousands, then more than anyone in the chamber could count. Counselor Yenth screamed, a psychic shriek that echoed through the minds of everyone present. They are here, she cried. They have been here all along. Around us, between us, inside the spaces we cannot see. We are surrounded. Admiral Vance nodded slowly. We have been here since before Fleet Commander Ziraxis arrived with his Armada. We watched him position his ships. We listened to his communications. We mapped every weakness in his formation. And he never knew we were there. Ziraxis stumbled back from the viewport, his scarred face pale with shock. My fleet, he gasped. Looking out at the stars, his 4,000 warships were still there, still in formation. But now they looked small and fragile compared to the dark titans that surrounded them. Human vessels had positioned themselves at every strategic point. Weapons trained on the Council's ships. Engines ready to pursue if any tried to flee. Your ships are unharmed, Vance assured him. For now. Whether they remain that way depends entirely on what happens in this chamber today. High Arbiter Thiessen drifted closer to the viewport. His light dimmed to a pale yellow, the color of fear among his kind. This technology, he said slowly, it should not exist. The energy required to manipulate dark matter would require more power than 1,000 suns. Dr. Okonkwo stepped beside him, looking out at the fleet with something like pride. We learned to tap into dark matter itself for power, she explained. Our ships do not just use dark matter. They exist partially within dark matter space. They can phase through solid objects, become invisible to any known sensor system, and generate gravitational fields strong enough to crush planets or collapse stars, Commander Chun added quietly. Though we have never had to use that particular capability, the implication hung in the air. Heavier than any spoken threat, Admiral Vance walked slowly around the chamber, looking at each counselor in turn, meeting their eyes or whatever served them as eyes. For 200 years, you thought you were watching us, she said. You sent spies and scouts and surveillance drones. You counted our ships and measured our borders and laughed at how primitive we seemed. She stopped in the center of the chamber, standing exactly where she had refused to kneel. But we were watching you too. And we were building. And we were waiting. And now here we are. And here you are. And suddenly things look very different. High Arbiter Thiessen turned away from the viewport to face her. And for the first time in 800 cycles, he looked every moment of his great age. What do you want? He asked, and his voice was barely above a whisper. Admiral Vance looked at him without pity. We want you to understand something, she said. We want you to understand that the universe has changed, that your old ways are over, that there is a new power in this galaxy, and it does not bow to anyone. She glanced at Dr. Okonkwo and Commander Chun, then back at the counselors. But before we discuss the future, Let me tell you about the past. Let me tell you what humanity discovered about your precious council while you were too busy laughing at our cargo ships to notice what we were really doing. And as the dark matter fleet hung silent and deadly in the space around them, Admiral Vance began to speak the truth. The council chamber had seen many things over its 3,000 cycles of existence, but it had never seen anything like this. The 12 elder races, beings who had crushed civilizations and exterminated species and reshaped entire regions of the galaxy according to their will, sat in stunned silence while 3 humans in simple black uniforms told them how things were going to be. Admiral Elara Vance stood in the center of the chamber, bathed in the strange light that filtered through the crystal walls, light that was bent and twisted by the dark matter warships that surrounded the station. "Let me be clear about something," she said, her voice carrying easily through the vast space. "We did not come here to destroy you." Ambassador Keth Voren looked up with something that might have been hope. "Then what do you want?" he asked, his earlier arrogance completely gone. "We want change," Vance replied. "Real change, permanent change. The kind of change that your council has resisted for 3,000 years. She began to pace slowly, her boots clicking against the crystal floor in a steady rhythm. "The subjugated races will be freed. All of them, immediately. Any species currently under council control will be given the choice to remain in a reformed alliance or to leave and govern themselves. There will be no retaliation against those who choose to leave." Councillor Yenth of the Mind Collective leaned forward. "And if some of them want revenge for what was done to them?" she asked. "Some of those species have suffered greatly under our rule. Then we will help them find justice through peaceful means," Dr. Okonkwo answered. "Tribunals, reparations, truth commissions. There are many ways to address past wrongs without creating new ones." Commander Chan nodded in agreement. "We are not interested in replacing one tyranny with another. We have seen enough of that. The galaxy needs healing, not more wounds." High Arbiter Thiessen drifted lower, his light still pale and diminished, until he was almost at eye level with Admiral Vance. "You speak of reforms," he said slowly, "but the Council has existed for 3,000 cycles. We have maintained stability across 100,000 worlds. Do you truly believe you can do better?" Vance met his gaze without flinching. "I believe that any system built on slavery and genocide is not stable. It is a time bomb. I believe that the species you have crushed and the worlds you have burned will eventually rise up against you, with or without our help. And I believe that when that day comes, you will face something far worse than we are offering now." She gestured toward the viewport, where the dark matter fleet hung silent and deadly against the stars. "We could destroy you," she said simply. "We have the power. We have the weapons. We have 200 years of righteous anger to fuel us. But we choose not to, because we believe that even you can change. Even you can learn to be better than you have been." "What makes you so certain?" Thiessen asked. Admiral Vance was quiet for a moment before she answered. "Because humanity has changed," she said. 200 years ago, we were divided and selfish and cruel to each other. We fought wars over resources and beliefs and things that did not matter. We destroyed our own planet's climate and drove countless species on our world to extinction." She looked around the chamber at the counselors who had dismissed humanity as primitive animals. "But when we reached the stars, when we saw what we could become and what we must never become, we changed. We united. We stopped fighting each other and started building something together. We chose to be better than we were, and we have spent 2 centuries trying to live up to that choice. You expect us to do the same?" Keth Voren asked, doubt heavy in his voice. "I expect you to try," Vance replied. "And I expect there will be failures and setbacks and moments when you want to go back to the old ways. But every time you falter, every time you attempted to crush a younger species or exploit a weaker neighbor, we will be there." Her voice hardened. "Watching. The word echoed through the chamber, and every counselor felt its weight. Fleet Commander Zyraxis stirred in his seat, his pride finally breaking through his defeat. "So we are to live under your surveillance forever?" he growled. "We are to become your subjects, your prisoners?" "Not prisoners," Commander Chum replied. "Partners. But partners who are watched until they can be trusted. You have 3,000 cycles of crimes behind you. Did you expect to be forgiven in a single day?" Admiral Vance raised her hand to forestall any further arguments. "Enough debate. Here is what will happen now. You have 1 cycle to begin the reforms we have described. Free the enslaved species. Open your records to independent observers. Begin the process of making amends for your past crimes." She looked at each counselor in turn, meeting their eyes or whatever served them as eyes. "At the end of that cycle, we will return to evaluate your progress. If you have made genuine efforts toward change, we will continue to work with you. If you have stalled or lied or tried to hide your continuing crimes, we will take more direct action." High Arbiter Thiessen asked the question that hung unspoken in the air. "And if we refuse entirely? If we decide to fight you despite your power?" Admiral Vance's expression did not change. "Then the next time we meet, you will not see us coming. You did not see us coming this time, and we wanted you to see us. Imagine what happens when we do not want to be seen." She turned to leave, flanked by Dr. Okonkwo and Commander Chun, and walked toward the massive doors that had opened for emperors and conquerors for 3,000 years. At the threshold, she paused and looked back at the assembled powers of the galaxy. "Humanity spent 200 years preparing for this moment," she said. "We are very patient. We have learned to think in terms of generations rather than days. We have learned to plant trees whose shade we will never sit in." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "But our patience has limits. You have 1 cycle. The clock starts now." The 3 humans walked out through the great doors, which closed behind them with a sound like a tomb ceiling outside. Their ship waited, surrounded by the dark matter fleet that had changed everything. And Admiral Vance allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction before the work truly began. Counselors remained in their seats for a long time after the humans departed. They looked at each other. These ancient beings who had ruled the galaxy with an iron grip for 3,000 cycles. And for the first time in their long existence, they did not know what to say. The dark matter fleet remained visible for exactly 60 seconds more. Long enough to burn its image into the memory of every witness. Long enough to make clear that this was no bluff and no dream then. One by one, the ships vanished, fading back into the darkness between stars. Becoming invisible, becoming impossible. Becoming shadows that would haunt the Council's nightmares for generations to come. High Arbiter Thiessen looked around the chamber at his fellow counselors. "We have 1 cycle," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. No one argued no, one protested no. One suggested fighting or scheming or finding some way to turn the situation to their advantage for the first time in 3,000 cycles. The Council of the Stars sat in stunned silence, humbled by a species they had called primitive, defeated by a power they had believed impossible, and forced to confront the truth of what they had become in the darkness of space. Humanity watched and waited. They had all the time in the universe, and they were very, very patient.